In the first 4 weeks after conception, embryonic cells begin to form into a neural plate. Eventually, this plate folds in on itself and goes on to form a groove. Eventually, the two sides of this groove meet and then connect to form a tube. This tube curls and forms the 3 sections that make up the brain, as well as the spinal cord. The 3 parts that make up the brain and the spinal cord are all responsible for different bodily functions that make us human and help us survive. The first of the 3 sections is the forebrain, which turns into the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex controls things like problem solving, thoughts, memory, and sensory stimulation. The second section is the midbrain, which turns into the control center for the body, which is responsible for sending information from the body to the brain. The last section that makes up the brain is the hindbrain, which controls our body's automatic functions such as breathing and digestion. Lastly, the spinal cord is the pathway for all the nerves throughout the body. Between weeks 4 and 8, the brain begins to split into hemispheres, and from weeks 8 to 26, the midbrain is covered by the rapidly growing cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is the bumpy part of the brain, but when it's first forming, it is rather flat. In week 28, the brain begins to grow rapidly and the folds of the brain begin to develop. This will continue on until week 40. Beginning at 18 weeks until birth, doctors can use an MRI to view fetal brain development. At this point, the brain is made up of 7 layers that change in thickness and in quantity throughout the pregnancy until the 36th week. Once the brain takes on a shape closer to its final form, MRIs can be used to see how the ridges on the brain get deeper until they are finished forming. The brain goes from near flat to covered in ridges that have nearly doubled in depth. The brain grows in layers, with the newest cells forming the outermost part of the brain. These cells are sent out as each layer forms and are sent to their final destination by glial cells. These cells then reach out towards each other, forming an input and an output for information to travel through that is received through the nerves. Information has to travel between a gap called the synapse, and over time these synapses may disappear in some places as the brain begins to become more accustomed to the individual's needs and routine.